Actually.
Thank you so much for coming to the Organic Magic of Worms presentation. I'm Cathy Nesbitt from Cathy's Crawly Composters. Are you concerned about the environment?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, wonderful. Wonder what more you can do?
Yes.
Get worms, I say. I'm a worm advocate, raising awareness about the benefit of using redwood glowworms to convert food scraps and paper into nature's finest fertilizer. Not an easy sell. Just a little bit of information about how I got into my great green business. I started in 2002, same year the Kill Valley landfill closed, and the Greater Toronto area started shipping garbage to Michigan. At the beginning of the program, you know, although we're a pretty big country, second largest, I believe, we couldn't find a place to put our garbage. So we started shipping our garbage to Michigan, and at the beginning, almost 200 garbage trucks were making the trip from the Toronto area to Michigan. Shame on us as Canadians for shipping our garbage out of the country. Like, not out of the city, out of the province, out of the country. Bye-bye garbage. And double shame on the Americans for accepting our garbage for cash. You know, and I say that when I do speaking for schools, and, you know, everybody laughs and it's kind of fun. And then that's where the joke ends, because it's not a joke. It's all about our planet and our climate, and shipping garbage around for money really doesn't make any sense at all when there's solutions to do it on site with worms or without worms. Just regular composting it's nature's way. So I was a social worker before starting my Great Green business, working with dual diagnosed adults, meaning doubly blessed with mental illness, and I loved that work. I really, really loved it. I couldn't work with management. Everybody's an expert. So I actually got injured at work, and I was a freelance behavior management specialist, which really sounds impressive, doesn't it? It doesn't fit on a business card. So, so when I got injured at work, I was really stressed, and I thought, okay, a freelance behavior management specialist means I didn't have a safety net. So when I was injured at work, I wasn't eligible for EI or anything. So it was either stay there and be stressed or do something else. So I was thinking about doing this business, but I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to do a business. I didn't know what it meant to even run a business. And I came home from work one day and was looking in the local paper, and there was an ad, and it said, "Are you a woman? Do you have a business idea?" Yes, yes. It was a course, a 6-month course to write a business plan and start a business. So I turned to my husband, I said, "I'm quitting my job, I'm taking this course, I'm starting a worm business. Hallelujah, won't this be fun? Who doesn't want to have a worm business?" Yeah, so great. And really, I started my business at a time. I had a spouse who was gainfully employed, and so won't this be great? Just so much fun. Well, so I took the course, started my business. In 2002, there was a garbage strike in Toronto. Garbage strikes are good for business if you're a composter. So I chose media as my marketing strategy, and I was watching the news, and people would be lining up for hours to drop off their garbage at the transfer stations. It was really driving me crazy. I said, wow, those people don't compost. Because if they did, if you compost, composting takes the stink out of garbage. You wouldn't care how long the strike was on because, you know, your garbage isn't smelling. So I thought, I'm going to take my worms on a road trip. I'm going to go and educate some people. But before doing that, I sent out press releases to the Toronto outlets. 5 minutes after sending my press release, I got a call from a reporter at the Toronto Star saying, "Oh, this is great, I got your press release. Last week I wrote an article about composting, but I forgot about the apartment dwellers. So this is perfect. After you're done at the transfer station, can you come down to the Star? I'd like to interview you." Yay! I was thinking I could just go right to the Star. But no, really, I want to educate people. I wanted to find out why they didn't compost. So this was a really interesting day. I went there by myself. I had my company shirt on. By myself, I went there. And I went to one transfer station. They weren't happy that I was there, but I talked to a few people. And then I went to another transfer station, which was kind of a main hub, and there was about 80 picketers there. And there was a gentleman recording, a private investigator recording. And I had a chat with him before, and he said he was recording because it was on a hydro field. And so they just wanted, I guess that was a regular hotspot when they do have labor issues. So I knew it was being recorded. So, okay, so I got on my way, and the cars were all lined up, and I would ask them a few questions. Do you compost? Why not? Would you if there was an incentive? And that was before I knew that there is an incentive in Toronto. $20 or $25 for a black earth machine, and at that time they would even deliver it for $30 or something. It's an $80 value, so what more incentive could you want than that? Anyway, so then the picketers were kind of getting upset that I was talking to the people, and so they said, while they were verbally assaulting me, if it wasn't being recorded, I probably would have been physically assaulted. You know, the mob mentality, not any particular person, just the mob gets together and, I am a threat. If everybody composted, there would be less, maybe, garbage collection. But there would be different businesses, wouldn't there? So I kept on my way, and they said, you have to leave, and I said, I don't, it's public land here, I can be here. I don't know where my bravado came from, I'm not sure, because it was pretty scary being in front of all of those people, that angry mob. So then they said, okay, if we can't make her go away, we'll tell the people that if they take anything from her, if they talk to this woman, we're not going to take your garbage. So people were rolling up their windows. Nobody would talk to me, because they were there, they had a mission, they were there to throw away their garbage. So then I went to the Star, and I had my first article in the Star July 18th, 2002. So I phoned up my husband, I said, yay, I got my first article in the Star, because large urban centers, this is indoor composting, large urban centers really are my market, people that live in apartments. So he said, that's nice, I'm on my way home, I just got downsized. Oh my gosh, no, now what have I done? Now I've got a worm business and we have no income, and people don't want to buy worms, and I don't have repeat customers, and oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? Anyway, here we are 11 years later, I'm still standing, and it's supporting myself and my husband full time. So, thank you very much, thank you, yes. And it's because I'm on a mission. I really believe that the reason that I was put on earth was to be a worm advocate. And that might sound a little bit airy-fairy or something, but I was afraid of worms before starting my worm business. And not that they would harm me, I know they don't have teeth or anything, just that they're gross or icky. And I certainly didn't want to have them in my house. So about 18 years ago, I looked after a teacher's worm bin. As an avid gardener and composter, I knew the value of the worm poo, but I didn't want to have worms in my house. A teacher friend was going away for the summer, and she said, I need someone to look after my worm bin. I think that we should try things before deciding if it's for us or not. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I just had just a Rubbermaid container or something. I would open up the container, throw the food in, and close the lid. So guess what happened? I was a fruit fly farmer. Yeah. So what I learned from that experience, and I believe that I was afraid of worms, and I had that fruit fly explosion. I believe that all of these things happened because now I'm a worm advocate, helping other people to overcome those objections. So, one thing that I learned was if you're going to take on worm composting, and I hope you do, don't be a fruit fly farmer. There's no market. They're hard to catch. They die in a day or two, and nobody's buying them. So there's certainly ways to not be a fruit fly farmer. So the worms that we use, has everyone seen worms when it rains and they come out and they're on the, yeah, fabulous, thank you. So those worms are called night crawlers. There are thousands of types of worms. Night crawler's one type, and the worms we use for worm composting are red wigglers. There are 4 types of worms that are ideal for worm composting. Red wigglers, European night crawlers, African night crawlers, and Perionyx, which is a tropical worm. You're looking for surface dwellers. The night crawlers live below the frost line, so they go 4 to 6 feet below the surface and come up at night to draw their food into their burrow. The red wigglers only go 4 to 6 inches, making them ideal to live in a container in our house, in our school, in our business, wherever we need to have worms to manage our scraps. And I'm going to show you a picture of a pound of red wiggler worms. Yes, in my hands. So this is a pound of red wiggler worms. Beautiful photo, isn't it? They eat about half their weight per day. So a pound of worms, half a pound per day, or 3 to 4 pounds per week. Each worm has about...
Can you hold it up just for a second? Sorry, I was zooming in there.
Each worm has 5 hearts. So in a pound of worms, 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound, 5 hearts each, 4 to 5,000 hearts in a pound of worms. It's a lot of love. And a great Valentine's gift. But note the receiver. Not everybody's going to be happy about getting a pound of worms. So the things that you can put in your worm bin, all of your fruit and veg, coffee, tea, pasta, rice, beans, grains, plant cooking cereal, it's endless what can go in. What stays out? No meat, no dairy, no sauce. If you're not sure, you can leave it out. The worms don't have teeth, so the more you chop up your scraps, the faster it breaks down, the more the worms can eat, is the basic formula. Any container will do for worm composting. It's not the container, it's creating the right environment for the worms. So just like backyard composting, the worms require a carbon-nitrogen mix. So the carbon that I use is shredded paper. Could be leaves, straw, cardboard, drink trays, ink cartons, paper towel rolls, toilet paper rolls. Just like the food scraps, anything can be used for your bedding. I would stay away from magazine paper, it's too glossy. And construction paper, when it gets wet, the color bleeds out of it. But otherwise, almost anything goes. You can feed your MasterCard and Visa statements, but I would pay them first. I don't think they're going to buy it, but the worms say in your statement. Probably not. And I tell the kids, you know, you can feed your homework to the worms, but the teacher might not believe that the worms eat your homework. You know, the dog used to eat the homework in the olden days. I talked about fruit flies, so I want to talk about how not to get fruit flies, because that is one of the objections often is, what about fruit flies? So if you've ever had fruit flies at home and you haven't had a worm bin, you know that the fruit flies don't come from the worm bin, they come from the food you're putting in. So I'm going to use bananas as my example. As the bananas come home from the grocery store or market, as they're getting speckled and ripened, it's the perfect environment for the fruit fly eggs to hatch and fly around and bug us. Just doing their job, but they bug us. So something you can do with any of your scraps that you don't generally wash, give it a quick rinse. That will wash, you know, your bananas, orange melon. Wash off the eggs, give it a quick rinse, and I didn't bring my bucket. Then add it into a container and let it start to decompose for a couple of days. Worms can't eat fresh food, so letting it start to, so although you can add fresh food in, it's going to take a little bit longer for the critters, the microorganisms, to get to it. So if you can add it, let it start to decompose first, and then add it into your container, that's going to speed up the process. You can also freeze your scraps and then thaw it out. Worms don't like frozen food either, by the way. Thaw it out, and that changes the molecular structure of the scraps. So, you know, if you've ever grown a tomato, maybe the first time you grew a tomato and thought, geez, I would love to have a tomato sandwich in February. So you put your tomato in the freezer, and then February, oh yeah, that tomato sandwich with that delicious tomato that I grew, I'm going to have a tomato sandwich. You put your toast down, and wow, I thought I was a loud talker. You put your toast down and bring your tomato out. As your tomato thaws, of course, you can't slice the tomato anymore. It becomes tomato soup or tomato sauce. So that's what happens to your peels. The structure is changed, and it breaks down faster. So that makes it more accessible to the critters. It also will release the moisture, so you can pour off any excess moisture, which will allow, the moisture is weight, so that will allow you to add more food into your worm bin. So the kind of things that so how do you set up your bedding? It's, you need some kind of a carbon source, so leaf, straw, cardboard, paper. A little bit of soil. You're adding the soil. The red wigglers are not soil dwellers, but they require the microorganisms and the grit. They have a gizzard like a chicken, so the grit helps them to process the food, and the microorganisms help to break it down for the worms. And then some crushed eggshells or agricultural lime. You can use calcium carbonate. In a pinch, you can crush up some tums and add those in, but I don't advocate buying anything. I mean, use what you have. And that's what I say to people. This is a way to manage whatever you have, whatever your waste product is. Waste in air quotes, because nature creates no waste. And there is no waste. So when you say we're throwing it away, is that somewhere? No, there's nowhere away. It's all one big blue marble that we live on. Yeah, so once you get your and then about 1.5 to 2 liters of waters. Those are the basic ingredients. You mix everything together and then add your worms on top. In a basic kit, you would have 1 pound or half a pound of worms. And then when you're feeding the food scraps, you pull back the bedding, add your chopped up food in the hole you've made, and make sure it's covered so you don't get fruit flies. So don't just throw your food in, unless you want to be a fruit fly farmer. But don't do that. Then you're going to rotate around the bin, bearing in different spots. You're adding additional paper, all of that additional food. It's really loud, I know.
She's only on for 5 more minutes.
Okay, this is a great great way to, if anyone's concerned about identity theft, this is a great way to feed your confidential documents to the worms. After the worms have converted it into compost, nobody's going to be able to piece that back together. You know, not that anyone's going to take your shreds, but there was an article.
It's belly dance.
I know. It's distracting. There was an article after the Thanksgiving Day parade in the States. You know, they do the ticker tape thing and they have the shredded paper. They apparently used police shreds, and they had the Social Security, is that what it's called in the States? The Social Security numbers, that you could read those numbers, you know, phone numbers, all kinds of things. Like people's identity was on those shreds. Wow, I wrote an article, I wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times and said, not that everyone's going to feed all their stuff to the worms, but if it's an additional measure of security, if you take those shredded paper and feed it to worms or compost it, then, you know, it's a little bit more secure than just throwing it on the street. Yeah, so once the worms have converted all material, it's about 3 to 6 months in a basic kit. In the chalet, it's 1.5 to 2. I'm going to talk about the chalet in a moment. So in a basic kit, it's about 3 to 5 months from setup to harvest. And when you're going to harvest from a basic kit, there's a few ways to harvest your worm bin. The dump and sort is the easiest way, so you dump all the contents out on a plastic sheet, put it in round piles. The worms are photosensitive or afraid of the light, so they go down into the piles, scoop off the top section, scoop around the sides. The worms will continue making their way away from the light. It's about an hour to do a basic kit, you know, the size of a recycling bin or something. Another way you can do it is push all the contents to one side, set up the bedding in the other side, and start feeding over here. The worms will migrate over. It's pretty slow. It takes maybe 3 to 4 weeks for the worms to migrate over to the other side. Because as long as there's still material in there for them to eat, they're going to keep on, you know, they're going to stay where they are. They'll also consume the castings up to 7 times to get the nutrients out, so you get a pretty fine cast. Pretty neat. And so once you get your worms separated, then you'll set up your new bedding, add the worms back in, continue the process, and use the black mold to fertilize your plants. And it's all we need to grow delicious, nutritious fruits and vegetables. It's really adding life back in. You know, there's products on the market that you can add to feed your plant and whatever, and sure, you'll get a big plant. It's designed to do that. Those chemicals, that's what they're designed to do. It's not really adding anything to the soil. So we need to feed the soil, not the plant, in order to be sustainable. So as the plant grows, the nutrients are taken out of the soil into the plant. So if we take those plant clippings and put them in landfill or do anything other than composting them, we're really robbing the soil of the nutrients that need to go back in. It's really a closed loop system. And it's nature's way. I mean, all this stuff was provided because the solution is here already. We don't need to reinvent anything. Nature provided the solution for us. So if you think that this is pretty neat, but you don't want to do the harvesting, the worm chalet is a fabulous alternative. So this is a tower composter. There are a few different designs of the tower composter. This is made in Ontario, so added bonus. We tried several different models of tower composters and settled on distributing the chalet. Of course, being manufactured in Ontario was added bonus. But it is a superior product as well. So it's sturdy plastic construction. There's 3 trays, and there's one at my booth, but it's sold. Thank you very much. Fabulous. So there's 3 trays. There's holes in the bottom of each tray, but I'm sure that you can come and see it for a few minutes before it goes away. That's the floor model that's being bought. And he's getting a tray of black gold with that. That's really an added bonus. There's holes in the bottom of each tray, so you just start on one tray. Same ingredients as the basic kit, so you would have your paper, soil, water, and eggshells. That's it. Mix it up, add your worms, and then feed your scraps. It's about 1.5 to 2 months that the tray will fill up, and you're still burying the food in so you don't get fruit flies. It's still done inside. When the tray fills up, instead of having to do the dump and sort or harvest the worms, as fun as that is, unless it's your business. Yay, it's harvest time again. Yay. Then you just set up the next tray, start feeding in the second tray. The worms will follow the food, so they migrate to the next level. By the time you get to the third tray, the first tray is finished. to move your trays around, because engineers are so smart. You turn the roof upside down, stack the trays in the roof. That's the space that you need. So if you live in a condo or something, that's all the room that you need. You don't have to worry about, you know, how are we going to do this? You know, if you have a basic kit, you kind of have to find a place that you're going to do your dump and sort. So then you just rotate your trays around. It's about 6 to 8 months for your first full cycle. And then, because the other 2 trays are already in process, every couple of months you get another tray of black gold. There's a tap at the bottom of the chalet. So as the food breaks down, the gas gets released, the methane, and the juice gets released. So in a single unit, you have to be careful that it doesn't get too wet on the bottom. In the chalet, the excess moisture will drain down. You can siphon it off. If it smells bad, it's become anaerobic. Plants always require aerobic bacteria to grow, so you would never use that on your plants. If it doesn't smell bad, then you can dilute it and water your plants and have liquid fertilizer. So it's a beautiful thing. Made here in Ontario. I know I said that. Fabulous. I love it. Any questions before I get into stories and stuff?
It's out, indoors. You can't do it outdoors?
Ideally indoors. It can be outside spring, summer, and fall. We do have quite a temperature fluctuation though, right? Some are super hot during the day, maybe a little cool at night. The worms don't like the temperature change. So there's 3 key components, thank you for that. 3 key components to successful vermicomposting. Temperature, moisture, and airflow. So temperature 16 to 28, so room temperature really. Moisture about 75% humidity. We're doing it in plastic, so there's very little evaporation. You rarely have to add additional water. Making sure it doesn't get too wet is really the issue, except in a tower composter where the excess moisture will drain down. And airflow. So you do need to have holes in your bin. Like people say, well, can I just do it in a sealed container? Yeah, but the worms will die, right? Because it's aerobic process, meaning with oxygen, so they do require holes in the container. And then the next question will be, well, can the worms get out of the container? Of course they can. But why would they? They can't see, they don't have eyes. There's no point in getting out of the bin and going sightseeing, they can't see. So, and they're eating half their weight per day, so there's no time for them to go sightseeing. The only reason they would crawl out of the bin is if the conditions were not right. It's become too wet, too acidic, not enough food, something is out of whack in the container. That's the reason that they would try to get out, because as soon as they climb out of the bin, they're done. Even as a worm farmer, my place isn't moist enough to keep the worms, you know, once they climb out, they die. So they're climbing out to their death. So you don't want that. If the worms are climbing out, somebody should call the SPCA because you're abusing your worms. Okay. What, 5 minutes? Come on, I haven't got into any stories yet. Okay, so quickly I got to talk about some stories because I've done some super cool stuff with my worms. I've diverted several tons from landfill single-handedly. Well, with the worms help. My worm farm was growing and I needed more food, and so I thought, what can I do? I live in Bradford. We had 9 coffee shops. We're a drive-through town. We don't know how to make coffee in Bradford. I don't know what to do. So I thought coffee grounds would be a fabulous thing to feed my worms. I don't have to chop and it smells nice and this would be great. So I went to the one named after a hockey player. We have 3 of those. Because they're producing the most, right? So I went there. They're operated by the same people. So I went and said, I'm a worm farmer in town. I'd like to collect your coffee grounds. And they said, oh, well, we don't know if you can. We've got to talk to head office. So I'm okay, well, I'll come back. I ended up going back 4 times. And finally they said, you can't collect our coffee grounds. There's a written policy that our coffee grounds have to go in the garbage. A written policy? Can you imagine that meeting? What are we going to do with our coffee grounds? We're creating a coffee conglomerate. Several thousand tons of coffee grounds we will be producing. What can we do? I don't know. What should we do with them? Hey, why don't we throw them in the garbage? Yes. Somebody write that down so we don't forget. Can you imagine? Really, I challenge the kids. I do a lot of school workshops because what the heck are the corporations doing that we don't even know? Why would you throw away coffee grounds? It's a resource. It doesn't even need to be composted. It can be added to your soil for your acid-loving plants, roseberries, azalea, blueberries, to name a few. Not that they could put all their coffee grounds on one rose bush. No, but just to know that there's something that can be done. Anyway, I asked them if I could take all their garbage, and they said no, thankfully, because we have a 1 bag one in Bradford. Can you imagine picking through all their... Okay, good, I'm glad they said no. But I left there thinking, darn, all coffee shops are going to have that policy, probably, that crazy written policy. Coffee player, got 6 more opportunities. So once I got over myself, I went to country style. We have 2 of those, traders. And the new location is not in a great location. So it's hard to get in and out when you want your coffee in the morning. So if it's not easy, we're not doing it. And if there's, 6 other opportunities, why would you go to that one? So I said to the owner of that shop that I would increase business. And I meant it. But it was a good pitch too. I said, when the people find out that you're being environmental with your coffee grounds, they're going to flock to your shop. Oh yes, they will. They're going to carpool, they'll have their to-go mug, they'll be riding their bike or whatever, but they're going to come. I was going to say they'd take the bus, but we don't have a bus in Bradford, so they wouldn't take the bus. So he agreed to participate, and so I went every day for 1 month to the coffee shop, the slowest shop in town, by the way, and collected 1,100 pounds of coffee grounds and filters. 1,100 pounds. Holy, what is the other shop doing? Because they're creating the most. I spent my days that summer, my backyard smelled like a coffee shop. It was fabulous. Separating the coffee grounds and filters. Why? I don't know, because the filter is a carbon source. Yes, it is. I could have just ripped it up and added it in, but no, I had too much time. I was separating the coffee grounds. I'm pretty high energy, you might agree. That summer I was really high energy. Lots of stuff getting done. Somebody said to me, hey, you know your coffee ground project? And I said, yes. And they said, do you wear gloves? And I said, gloves? No, why would I wear gloves? It's just coffee grounds. And they said, have you heard of the nicotine patch? I'm like, oh my gosh, caffeine careening through my veins. Oh my gosh, I apologize to my husband for that summer. So I'm just about out of time. So does anyone know what the name is for a group of worms? The collective nouns, a school of fish, a gaggle of geese, a herd of buffaloes. What of worms? It's the name of my documentary. Yeah. Do you know, or you don't remember the name? I gave you one.
I know.
Oh my gosh, okay. Well, it's called A Squirm of Worms. And I usually say to the kids, I'm going to give you a couple, I take some suggestion, whatever they have a couple of guesses, and then I say, okay, it starts with S, and it rhymes with worm, and it's what they do, and it's not wiggle. And only one time, and it did sperm get yelled out. And I was like, squirm of worms? Yes, it is! So, that was the only time. I do high school, I do university, and no one since then has said the SP word. And so, yes, squirm of worms. So, because you all came to my thing, I would like to give you all one of my documentaries. While I was researching my documentary, and I'm going to end, while I was researching my documentary, I will give everybody one, I discovered that the early explorers, when they set out on their ships, they would take worms with them, because worms are soil makers. They would have their soil makers, they would have their seeds, they could grow food in the new land. Kind of important. A few years ago, I heard the Canadian astronaut Dr. Robert Thirst speak, and he spoke of the Mars exploration. He said, a trip to the space station, 200 to 300 kilometers, so like a day trip. A trip to the moon, 3 to 4 days, so like a weekend trip. A trip one way to Mars once they get there, about 3 years. 3 years. So people said, oh my gosh, how are you going to have enough air to breathe or water to drink? He said, water and air we have covered. It's food. How do we bring enough food to feed our crew for the return trip? So they're doing research right now, bringing redwood blueworms to the red planet Mars once they get there. So I used to end my presentations with, it's not rocket science, it's earth science. Now it's rocket science too. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today.